Special effects. Good morning, or hello, I should say. Today is Thursday, April 9th, 2020, the pandemic time. So I'm Gary Byrne. I'm with my co-writer and electronic mentor, Grant Schmidt. Grant also does my social media. Grant helped me write both my books, Crisis of Character and Secrets of the Secret Service. Not only did he help me, he actually, basically he just drained my memory and pretty much he's my fallback guy. Grant and I today are doing this podcast. We're going to talk about a couple different things. Like I said, we're in the middle of the pandemic. Grant's at his house. I'm at my house. I'm quarantined with my wife, my daughter, my son, and our freaking cat. So
three-legged cat.
Yeah, my three-legged cat. So life is good, other than the obvious. And I just wanted to say to anybody who is that has the Chinese communist virus, my heart goes out to you. Anybody that passes away from it, of course, my sympathies. And so we're going to move forward. Grant, what's the first thing we're going to talk about this morning?
Well, so really, we're just going to talk about kind of one and only thing, and we'll have a discussion about that. We were planning on having a discussion about the Second Amendment in the pandemic and sort of the state of the Second Amendment. But we're going to do that in the following episode. This episode is going to be about Linda Tripp, who just passed away.
Right.
And so I thought we dig into that. I think the announcement came out last night. And now it's interesting to see. One, I'm just amazed that the mainstream media picked up the story like it did. I haven't been getting the paper, so I don't know if it's like a page 6 or a front page kind of thing. But in my mind, I just always thought that when someone who was involved in that scandal, proceedings, whatever you want to call it, passed, that if they were on one side, they wouldn't be remembered, and if they were on another side, they would be, big deal.
Right.
So for in her case, I'm really surprised they picked it up, and it seems like she's getting some fair treatment, I would say. I don't know if you.
Yeah. So the funny thing about the mainstream media is when somebody passes, no matter how much they butchered them and how dishonest they were about them, when they pass away, they at least go neutral. So Linda was always portrayed incorrectly. So let me start with my relationship with her. So when I first started working at the White House in the Secret Service Uniform Division in 1991, she's one of the first people I kind of stumbled across that wasn't in the Secret Service.
Really?
And I kind of have forgotten about a lot of this. And Grant, you play a role in this eventually in this story. So, who was Linda Tripp? So Linda was a government employee that worked at the White House complex. She had been there at least since the Reagan administration. And she wasn't, administrations came and went. President Carter was president. He left. The Reagan administration came in. Linda Tripp started working there at some time. When the Reagans left and President Bush became president, Linda Tripp's position did not change. It wasn't political, so to speak. What she did was she was like an administrator, and you have to look at that at a broad term. And one of the things she did was, like, for instance, when the Clintons came in, she was the person to help set up the legal counsel's office. And when I mean set up, like when these administrations get there, the funny thing about a political campaign is that as it's going on and they're spilling their version of who their candidate is, in this case, Bill Clinton, you think these people know everything, but you have to put it in perspective. And this isn't negative about the Clintons or any their administration or any administration, but when you get to the White House complex, it is enormous. And it is foreign to you. I don't care how many times you were there before, walking through with somebody who worked there. You don't know shit about the White House complex. And you don't even know where the coffee maker is. You don't know where the toilet is. You don't know where supplies are. You don't know how things work. And this is one of the things that got the Clintons in so much trouble, was when they found out how something worked, if they didn't like it, they tried to fix it. We can go into the telephone story later on, but so Linda Tripp is that person. So I I don't remember exactly. I'm telling you what I know.
One of the things we talked about in both books was the phone systems and
Right.
how, in the ComSec, the communication security, and every
Right.
time, like they literally had operators in the White House that would connect you old school. And then
Right.
on top of that, you had, basically with the Secret Service, like technicians. They weren't officers, they weren't agents, but they're monitoring all
Right.
waves and signals going in and out. And then every administration comes in and they're like, well, this thing's 20 years old. And they try to upgrade it, but by the time they upgrade it, it's again 20 years old. So, and it costs an enormous amount of money. But that's one of those things that,
Well,
like, when you
yeah.
think of what the busybodies do, that's there's just doing busy things. And so
Right.
I've not yet heard a concise description of what it was that Linda Tripp did. Everyone says a civil work service. She worked at the White House. So
right.
fill me in.
So she would come in and we'll talk about the legal counsel's office, because I was around working in the West Wing when she was setting it up. And she would come in and, meet the people and tell them what the responsibilities are. I mean, literally show them where you park. Here's your parking passes. Here's where you park. Here's where you're allowed to park. Here's where you can't park. Here's where you can get coffee before you come up to your office. Here's how you set up your account at the Navy mess. Here's who you contact at the Navy mess. Here's what, when the president does this, this is your responsibility. Here's how the information flows. Literally, this is the inbox, this is the outbox. Here's where the computer's set up. If you want something, here's the contacts for the computer people. Well, we want this. Well, that's not possible because this building is 200 years old and it doesn't do that, but it was modern. Don't get me wrong. The White House was they're pretty good about keeping it modernized. And the phone story, and we can get into that later if we want to, it wasn't so much that the phone system was, the story about that wasn't that it was new, it was that it was old, it was brand new, but the Clintons wanted to change it because they thought somebody was listening to them. But setting that aside, so Linda's job was to help them, literally show them where the safes were. Here's the combinations of the safe. Who was going to be the safe's guardians? And she would make these people understand, listen, this is not the safe for the state of Arkansas. This is the federal government. If you screw this up, the Secret Service Uniform Division is going to come and arrest you. And if they find this safe open, they're going to, you can get in a lot of trouble here. So she would work that out. She would teach them that. She helped. She's helping the legal counsel's office get set up. And normally, and this was very common. And it was very common with Linda because, in my experience, because she was so competent. She was actually a good person to be around. She was very upbeat. She smiled a lot. And she was pretty good about getting the best out of people. And I don't mean manipulative. I mean, because my relationship with her, the first time I met her, was probably because I stopped her from moving in a certain direction. Because I think the first time I came across her was I was actually working out on West Executive Avenue during a movement of the president, and I stopped her. And she knew immediately. She knew more about what I was doing than what I did. And
you were the new guy at the time,
right? And she literally, I think it's possible that she actually addressed me like that. And of course, I'm the new Secret Service guy, and everything I do is the most important. And she was immediately disarming. And again, I'm not exaggerating. People like Linda, who worked there all the time, the career employees who didn't change with administrations, they knew more about what we did than we did when we first got there. It was just, and I liked her. She was funny. She was nice. But and her and I had this conversation not too long ago, a few years ago, when my first book came out, was that I certainly had a stick up my backside when I first got there. People were afraid to approach me because I was so rigid, but she was not. So
there's video of that on YouTube.
Yes.
When a number of people were, questioning your proximity to the president and things like that. You gave me, or you found an old documentary in which these two journalists or whatever documentarians go cross country. They stop at the White House, and there's a small bit in there where they basically have like a hidden massive VHS kind of camera that she's like kind of stuck under her arm, and she films her going into George like from the parking lot to George
Right.
Stephanopoulos'
Right.
office, and it was on television. You had ordered the DVD, and then when this whole thing came up, you were like, "Oh, I got to find that DVD." You found it. I pulled the footage of it and uploaded it to YouTube. And so you can see you interacting with them and George Stephanopoulos. And George Stephanopoulos is like, I corresponded with these people. I can totally vouch for their, not being spies or not being, having evil motivations. And you can see in the video that you totally have, you're that guy. You're there to be that stick in the mud.
I don't believe you. I don't believe a word you say. So anyway, so back to Linda. So she was, I'd see her at least a couple times a week, sometimes a couple of times a day, because especially when I worked in the West Wing. So I don't know I don't remember the order that she did this, but I know she set up the legal counsel's office. And what I started getting to is, and this was common with Linda, was once she started setting it up, a lot of times they would offer her a position. Like, hey, you know what you're doing. Stay in here and help us make this run right. And that really wasn't her job per se. I mean, she could do it, but her job was to, especially in the very beginning, there's a lot of offices to set up. The important ones, legal counsel's office, the National Security Advisor's office, but which doesn't need a lot of setup because they'd had permanent employees too, but it needs some. And then like the other offices, and basically she would tell them, who you contact to get certain spaces. And she was just a wealth of knowledge. And like I said, she was a lot of fun she was funny to be around. And I liked her for the reason that she got me. Like she had seen 100 young officers like me, both male and female, who were rigid and, thought the whole world revolved around. And to a certain extent, it was, our job was important, but she also understood that complex was a working, complex, that there are a lot of shit needed to move to make the government and our country run. And so anyway.
You had problems with the people that didn't understand that and didn't have the patience and the wherewithal to navigate all those different
and she
moving
was kind
pieces.
Inadvertently, she was kind of a help with that, because with talking to her, I understood really quick who shouldn't be over there. And it's not like I didn't understand our pass system, but as you know, the Clinton administration changed the way the passes were used. And so anyway, so moving forward, you and I write Crisis of Character in about as secretly as possible. One of my caveats was nobody can know about this. I want everybody who ever had anything to do with it, with me and the Secret Service, the White House, to have complete deniability. And plus we didn't want it to leak out, because I still, in the very beginning, I'm not sure, it was articulated like this, but I still wanted the ability to deny that we were doing it.
Right. We had talked about reaching out to some key players.
Right. She would have been reaching out to Linda would have been huge, but it never occurred to me. Well, it did occur to me, but one of the reasons, and it's good to tell this story from Linda, from my perspective of Linda. I didn't want to reach out to somebody like Linda Tripp, because she was treated so poorly by the press and by the Democrats. And of course, they turned the focus from not Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky's behavior, but to Linda's behavior. And all Linda's behavior was trying to protect her friend, because Monica was clueless. She had no idea what she was doing. Her behavior, Bill Clinton's behavior and Monica's behavior.
Yeah, well, they're
almost unseated the most popular Democratic candidate ever. And you can argue back and forth that Barack Obama was more popular. I disagree with you, because I was there at the time. My insight to presidents is from behind the curtain, and I'm telling you, Bill Clinton was their savior. This guy. He could spin shit. He could look you in the eye. He did. He literally looked these people in the eye up in New Hampshire, whose jobs were going overseas because of this, sending all their jobs over to China and stuff, their manufacturing jobs. He looked them in the eye and told them they would be better off eventually. And they believed him. And it was the biggest line of bullshit ever. So, anyway, so That's who Bill Clinton really was. And it was his behavior, the way he's always, he was always been a predator and going after women. And based on my experiences and what we know now, his thing was, if he found a woman attractive, he would hit on her. If it didn't work, sometimes he would move on. Sometimes he became more aggressive. And we know that from the Kathleen Willey story. We know it from Juanita Broderick. And so anyway, and you also have to look at it from the perspective of one of the reasons that Monica Lewinsky, her train wreck story she didn't find out what Juanita Broderick found out and some of these other women found out, was because she was willing. She wanted to be romantically involved with them. Think about it from that perspective. So Linda's.
Well, and we do know from Monica Lewinsky's autobiography, I mean, when people like dispute like your book and stuff, you just casual conversation, I say, well, don't date Gary's word. Read Monica Lewinsky's autobiography.
And her testimony to the FBI, right?
And her testimony. But that autobiography, he was so incredibly manipulative, especially in contemporary times, because your book sort of preceded Me Too, and I think it would have been better received post Me Too. Right. But the manipulative behavior, he clearly basically hunts her down, brings her in, right? And she was a willing participant in that. But the way he presented it was, he was like, no, I can't. Come to my room when no one's here. Right. Oh, I can't. I'm married and have a daughter who's like almost your age.
Yeah.
It's bizarre, and my favorite part of her autobiography, and I think it demonstrates the relationship between her and Linda Tripp even, is in the autobiography. She says that in one of her last meetings with President Clinton before their breakup, is he's sort of confessing that he's a sex addict, and he produces a calendar that he was keeping of how long he could go, like how long of a streak he could go without being who he was, like without cheating on his marriage, and because it was like, how many days you can go, how many days are you clean, how many days can you go without, and then Linda Tripp knew that because of their conversations, and so I guess my question is, when do you think, knowing what you know about Linda Tripp, do you think that she was always, like, it was a slow increase? Because she definitely had it out at some point in the road. She definitely had a heart out with the Clintons, and she goes to the FBI and she's like, I'm going to get you documentation. She records her conversations with Monica Lewinsky over the phone. She's making notes. At some point, she goes full Monty,
Right. So my interpretation of that is that she was actually recording Monica before she told the FBI, because she was afraid for her. She could not make Monica understand that she was going down a very dangerous road. Again, the point I was trying to make earlier was Bill Clinton's behavior and Monica's behavior almost unseated, again, the most popular president ever.
And one of the most powerful positions in the world.
Right, but you have to understand, you have to look at this from the outside perspective to understand any presidency. This is any presidency. There are billions of dollars at stake for years to come.
True.
If Bill Clinton gets unseated, here's a good example. Don Tyson of Tyson Chicken loses his inside guy because Bill Clinton was his inside guy. Don Tyson funneled as much money legally and possibly otherwise, according to some of the stories, into the Clintons, their entire political career, to get him to the Oval Office so they could first to the governor of Arkansas. And this is one example. And there's many other people out there that wanted Bill Clinton to keep going higher and higher because they knew this guy could look you in the eye and tell you the sun was not hot and you would believe him. They knew this guy was so manipulative and cunning, and they knew that his wife was so driven for power that they believed them to be unstoppable. His behavior and Monica's behavior almost unseated this. I mean, it is not an exaggeration to say that even today, in 2020 that people are still benefiting from him being in office.
Well,
Because
there's no doubt. There's no.
yeah,
I mean,
no,
there's no
and
doubt
that's
because
like that
of
with,
the domino effect. But I mean,
right, right.
and
And I'm
you had
not
made a
saying
point earlier to your point now when you're writing the book was that you always thought that Monica could have been like a
right.
double agent because you were
Yes.
thinking, what amount of money would the KGB or the Russians or whatever pay, or what resources would they spend to have the same result that these two people's behavior ended up having anyway?
Right.
Like you imagine like the Kremlin, them sitting around a room being like, is she one of ours? Did we do this? Did we do
Yeah.
this? Are you sure we didn't do this? You
Yeah.
sure no one's over there, making this
Right.
happen? Like their equivalent of the CIA?
Yeah. No, I agree. No, I agree 100%. And as we talked about this. I brought that up when I first got subpoenaed.
Yeah, it's your point, not mine.
Right, right. In the first or second week of me giving deposition to the Secret Service lawyers during the President Clinton's impeachment scandal, I brought that up, and they first looked at me like I was crazy. And then one of the Secret Service lawyers, all of a sudden, because I'm a Cold War warrior, and I'll say that again for those. I was started in the Air Force in 1981, 82, excuse me, and that was the middle of the Cold War. And so I refer to myself as a Cold War warrior, and it was ingrained in us about our behavior. You didn't.
The walls have ears, like
Everything.
posters, kind
You
of
had
thing.
to be careful about who what girls the U.S. Air Force wasn't trying to make you a moral person for morality. They didn't want you to congregate or hang around prostitutes because they were spies. And if they weren't spies, they would become spies. You know what I mean? Like, so
Right.
that's the
Right.
mentality.
If you blackmail
Right.
someone, you flip someone, you gather intelligence.
So
Right.
in the second week of my dealings with Monica in the early to mid 90s, that's one of the first things that popped in my head. I'm like, how is this woman getting this kind of, she is so slippery. And it became clear because Monica Lewinsky was literally raised in Beverly Hills. She told me this herself, and she was not used to hearing the word no. And we found out later on in our research is that Bill Clinton wasn't the first married man she went after. She had issues there.
And not the last.
Right,
Not the
right,
last. I mean, her
right.
autobiography is really
Right.
incredible.
Right. So this was her modus operandi, and she befriended people in the Secret Service. Bill Clinton's secretary, Monica Lewinsky, the Navy. She befriended as many people as she had to.
She befriended Linda Tripp.
Right, and Linda Tripp to right, no, exactly, to get her to help facilitate her access. Linda had a lot of clout. If Linda said to whatever group inside that administration that she was working for, if Linda said to them, "Hey, listen, I need access. I need you to give access to intern A, B, or C," Linda got it because I need this person to help me facilitate this stuff. There wasn't any questions asked. So anyway. But so just and again, this part of the conversation started out as I'm trying to get across the point of why the mainstream media, but more importantly, the Democratic Party and supporters wanted to keep Bill Clinton in office. It wasn't about his legacy as far as his reputation. They wanted to keep that control and power. And his behavior and Monica's behavior almost took it away. So when Linda Tripp decided that she needed to protect her friend because she understood the stakes. Look, she was a smart woman. She understood the power of the White House from every aspect. And I mean, from a Democratic perspective and a Republican perspective. And she understood how ruthless these people were. She really was in fear for her life. And inadvertently, it's not an exaggeration. I've said it before. Linda Tripp saved Monica's life from two perspectives. One, from the perspective of her possibly having one of these Arkansas suicide accidents, or her becoming so depressed that she took her own life. And Monica talks about that.
She does talk about that.
And I will tell you that she saved our careers, because what you have to understand is this giant political steamroll that I'm describing to you. What saved us was that Linda Tripp made those recordings. One. Two, she convinced Monica Lewinsky to keep the blue dress that Monica believed had DNA, Bill Clinton's semen on it, That's right. The president was walking around the White House ejaculating. So it had Bill Clinton's, they believed to have Bill Clinton's semen on it. And
and what's crazy about that too, just as the way they got turned on, this gives you an example of the Ken Starr, how broad his investigation had to go. And people said, oh, at some point your investigation has nothing because it has to get so broad that it proves that you're grasping at straws. But they subpoenaed one of Monica Lewinsky's old familiar friends, who at the time was working in Japan.
That's right.
So she had to come back from Japan. Now, to anyone, you'd be like, why are you subpoenaing some old college, I think, colleague to come back? It's just, that would be so, like, anyone would think that's just preposterous. It's ridiculous. You're grasping at straws. But in that interview, the friend says something like, well, for goodness sakes, she has as a keepsake a dress that she's never washed that has the president's, I don't know a good way to say it. DNA, thank you. DNA on it. And of course,
man juice.
I can contemplate that their jaws must have hit the floor, and that's what set the whole thing into motion.
Yes.
And it sort of corroborated, and then you have Linda Tripp, and then but my question to you is, when you were going through your getting subpoenaed, you got subpoenaed 6 times. At what point in the process did you realize that there was sort of a parallel effort, that what you and your fellow officers were saying was also parallel to the efforts of Linda Tripp?
We had no clue. We had no clue up until the story of the DNA, that the dress existed, and that's what saved us. That's what saved Monica, certainly, and it saved me, because, as you know, Grant, you're good or bad, you're a subject matter expert on this now, as much as you can be from not being in it. And you were a damn child when this was taking place. But anyway, so we didn't know about the dress. I knew that I had seen his DNA, his semen on towels and tissues, but I know it had been destroyed. As you know, I destroyed it one time. But again, this is before. You have to keep it in context. This is when it's happening, not during the investigation. This is years before. So
early 90s is when this stuff's happening. Late 90s is when the investigation's coming out.
The point I'm trying to get to, and I cannot state this hard enough, is without that dress, this investigation would have not gone away. Ken Starr knew it would have still happened just like it did. My colleagues and I would have risen up as having information. I would have probably still risen to the top. My name was still all over those records, and I had nothing but my word. What do you think you saw what the Clinton machine did to Monica, who still supports the Democrats, it tells you how mentally crazy she is, in my opinion, how devoutly nutty she is. And the other thing too is, I guess the word I'm looking for is Monica's the true sycophant. And then the other thing is that they would have kept going forward, and it would have been my word against theirs, and they would have. I would have been, the Secret Service eventually would have thrown their hands up and said, "Hey, you're on your own." And I guarantee you that's true, because in certain ways, as you know, Grant, the Secret Service was hiding a lot of stuff. They were hiding the behavior of some of their executives who were having affairs with Clinton administration people. They were manipulating us forward, the uniform division guys like myself, to protect the upper echelon, to protect Bill Clinton.
And only one agent ended up testifying, or being forced to testify, and he was. It was
3. Right.
Was it 3?
Yeah. So it was you're talking about Larry Cockle, who wasn't even there when most of this took place, and then there were 2 junior agents, and then a former agent. But they knew the thing that hurt myself and my colleagues was that we did our job so well. We recorded our names in that book outside the Oval Office. We did our jobs so well. And when they looked at when they subpoenaed that log, and they kept saying Byrne, Byrne, the other guy's name, Chinnery, everybody's name. And then they literally sat down. I mean, we didn't know this then, but we discovered this later on. And some of this is what I put together on my own while we were doing our research. The little bit of research we had to do for the first book was that they literally sat and counted, and they decided, well, let's see, Byrne's in here 307 times, he wins. So that's who we're going to focus on. And then what we also didn't know was that the grand jury had been impaneled for a long time, and Ken Starr was good at what he did, and he went out and found people that had been fired or left the Clinton administration, and they kept asking about the uniform division, and this one guy's name kept coming up, or 3 or 4 people, and then and literally we found out later on that some of them were saying in the grand jury, if anybody knew what was going on, it was this guy, or this girl, or these officers, because they weren't.
I wonder with Linda Tripp knowing all the inner workings and sort of gears and cogs of the White House. Yeah. Because we had surmised in one case that it was people who had been fired. Yeah. It had been people who were removed, who had sort of talked into the Starr investigation sort of off the record and pointed the Starr investigation, if you want to know about something or other, go and talk to so-and-so. And then that's how the Uniform Division got involved. But prior to this whole thing, the Secret Service and the Uniform Division were very much off limits, with the exception of Nixon and his bop it, boop it, tap it, how to erase recordings. But I wonder.
There was also an incident in the Reagan administration, some civil suit that somebody filed against Reagan, where a Uniform Division officer was supposedly testified in a statement of something that happened. It was nothing like this.
Yeah, there was one where he was there was a uniformed officer stealing china and things like that.
But anyway.
But my point is, Linda Tripp strikes me as someone who would not point the FBI towards the Uniform Division or the Secret Service at large. I feel like she would know how much the cake is baked to not point them in that direction. And I also think, because she went to such great lengths, and the major question that came from her legacy, I think the number one question from her legacy is, why her? There's so many people that had interactions.
I can answer that.
So tell me.
I can tell you why her. Because she knew what right from wrong was. Listen, Monica Lewinsky man or woman watching this podcast, man or woman, we all have friends. And our friends have talked to us about their relationships with their significant others, whether it be the opposites, whatever your preferences are, that's not the issue. Emotion is the same. Love, lust, dislike, hate, it's all the same. So your friends have told you about their relationships. Now, picture this. Monica Lewinsky is confiding in Linda Tripp, her friend, and they were good friends, and Linda was a great friend. But at some point, Linda realized when Monica was telling her intimate stories about her physical relationship with the most powerful man in the world, where they were sneaking around, where Monica had already stepped over and crushed all the security procedures and manipulated her way in there. I mean, at some point, I'm not speaking for Linda Tripp, but at some point, Linda had to realize, and we can probably find this somewhere, is that my friend is crazy. She has gone way over
crazy, but not.
But manipulative, cunning, when she realized.
But the relationship was highly emotionally charged.
Yes.
And I think Bill Clinton kind of has that disconnect where he's an incredible people person, but at the same time he openly states that he didn't fully emotionally comprehend the damage that he was doing to this young person that was less than half his age. But not to get into that, but I think from what you're saying, Linda Tripp is the kind of person that realized that if she didn't act, that Monica would either take her own life, or because Monica Lewinsky now is in a bad place, and it's something that Bill Clinton has pseudo apologized for or kind of affirmed. But I think Linda had the foresight to recognize that without her doing what she did, Monica Lewinsky would have either taken her own life or sort of been, put
Crushed.
in the back of the bus.
Crushed. No, she'd have been crushed. She would have been crushed. I'm telling you, she would have destroyed herself literally and not just publicly. We all understand that Monica Lewinsky, when you hear that name, the jokes are long and hard and what was used. When you hear Monica talk about the way she was treated, it's all true. But what she doesn't tell you is that it was the Democratic Party doing it. Whether she realizes that or not, and I have to go back just a little bit, and then I'm going to start wrapping this up about Linda. I have to go back a little bit about what you said about Bill Clinton. You said that Bill Clinton acknowledges that he didn't realize it. That's bullshit. That's Bill Clinton bullshit. Bill Clinton didn't care about anything but Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton came down on three sides of everything, and I've talked about this. You and I have talked about this during our research. Bill Clinton knew what he was doing was wrong, and he was telling Monica what he was doing and what he was wrong, but he was still facilitating their relationship, and he was still, think of
my thing is, I'm not a psychologist.
I'm not either. But
his behavior, you're correct. His behavior was like he's doing it. He's like setting the tripwire, and he's like, I don't want to do it though, but walk this way. It's really
right. And then when you step up, when you hit the tripwire, he's doing away with the damage from the tripwire, so he can still have his physical release. And he's just right.
I mean, I think a normally processing person, if they did something, the idea is you do something wrong, even if, let's say I'm a kid, I steal $20, my parents give me a stern talking to, I realize right from wrong, I don't do that again. But for someone like Bill Clinton, who repeatedly has these emotional, physical, illicit, illegal relationships with people, it's truly bizarre. And because I know we want to wrap up, give me some sort of parting thoughts on Linda Tripp and her character. I mean, your book was called Crisis of Character. Of course, she must have had her own crisis of character, but she seemed sort of just, even more so than you, frankly, just like an absolute bull. Like,
well, one of the things you'll remember I made clear to you, and I hammered you into the ground, was when we have to talk about Linda Tripp. And again, I never thought I would ever hear from her or have any contact with her when I was writing the book, that we had to tell the truth about her, and that she is the real hero in this, because she did the right thing. She was trying to save her friend. She was trying to help uphold our laws and Constitution. She knew how crazy the behavior that Monica was doing, how dangerous it was. So she's the real hero here. She did the right thing under the worst circumstances. She knew what was going to happen to her. And one of the hardest things I ever had to watch was, I was at the White House when the story was out. We knew what was going on. I'm watching the press chase Linda Tripp up the steps of her home with her children, and they are ripping her apart. And I told you this when we talked about it. I wanted to get in this Secret Service vehicle, drive over there, pull my baton out, and just attack all the press and just let them arrest me. I really wanted to do that, because they were losing. This is one of the ways and one of the times the press went wrong and kept going wrong.
Yeah.
They were attacking the messenger and not the behavior of the president.
Well, and they did it to Monica as well, but they were attacking the messenger, and they were attacking also the appearance of the messenger and the way that they made fun of Linda Tripp.
And the Clinton,
it's one of those things where if you talk to somebody about it, and we've all had these conversations where you say in 2020, looking back, when we tell someone history and we say the way that Linda Tripp was treated by the press was so beyond the pale unfair by any standard, that because she had the tapes and such to corroborate her word, which was more than most anybody else had, including the president. And they attacked the messenger, and they went after her appearance, and they made fun of her on SNL and things like that. And it wasn't okay then, and it wouldn't be okay now. I mean, but for her to bear all of that, it is just
so right. No, I
It's
agree.
amazing.
And I think her character is stellar. I know that's true because after my book came out, our book came out. So I'm going to wrap this up real quick, if I can. It's going to take me about 5 minutes, 4 minutes. So Grant and I are in Northern Virginia. We're in, they call it horse country. It's like, about 30 to 50 miles outside of Washington, D.C. in Virginia. It's these rolling hills. I have my son with me, who, as we're driving to this place for this event, this resort hotel, he looks at me and he goes, "People really live like this? Oh my God!" And all these houses. These are big colonial mansions sitting on, at least 10 acres. Some of them have hundreds of acres. So anyway, while I'm there, this is the first time I'm giving a speech in front of, this is all women. It's a Republican women's group. And I understand there are probably people who agree with my message, but I am intimidated. And I'm standing in front of, I say between 60 and 100 women. I think that's about right. And
That was a big event.
halfway through my introduction, as I'm trying to get across who I am, this woman jumps up and I'm like, oh shit, here we go. And I'm looking at this woman and I look at her and I'm like, oh my God, like I have this comforting feeling as I'm looking at her. And she's probably a little older than me. And all of a sudden she starts saying, "I know Gary Byrne." And I'm like, oh shit. Oh, here we go. It's on, And she goes, and she introduces herself. I won't say her name. She introduces herself. And she says, "I was Gary's first supervisor at the White House. And I am telling you, everything out of his mouth is stellar, the truth. I was there. He is in a position to tell you exactly." And like, I almost started to cry.
I remember that. I wasn't
Yeah.
sure you were going with this story, but I remember this. Yeah.
Right. So afterwards, and this is why I'm not sure if you were actually, so afterwards, my son comes up to me and he goes, "Dad, we are in Graceland. These are our people. They live free. They have guns. They ride horses. They speak their minds. They're on." And I go, "Yes." And my Ethan was probably 12, 14 at the time. And I was like, "Yes, on this." He goes, "Dad, I have never felt so comfortable in my life in the mix of strangers." And I said, "Oh, good." So anyway, this woman comes up to me. We talk, and she says, I have a message from a friend. And I said, a mutual acquaintance. I said, "Oh yeah, who's that?" She said, "Linda Tripp." And I said, "Oh shit, Linda Tripp." And many times during our writings, I was like, "God, I wish I could reach out to Linda, but it's not fair to her. It's not fair to put her in a position." She's very careful about her. She only goes public when she needs to defend herself and make her points. And I'm not dragging her into this. And so now she's reaching out to me. And I said, "Absolutely." So I think I gave her my email. So not too long after that, Linda got in contact with me. And then Linda gave me a cell phone number that was just for texting. And then we started texting. And once she got comfortable with me, and she was comfortable with me because she had a very good relationship with Sean Hannity. And so we were building a relationship with Sean Hannity. And now I don't know if Sean ever went to Linda and said, "Hey, do you know who this guy is?" I don't know that. But what I do know is that once my book came out, that she had conversations with Hannity and said, "Yeah, this guy is spot on." You know what I mean? Like, and he's a good guy, and I remember him. And so then we would correspond. We would talk. We talked on the phone a lot. She went right out and bought my book. One of the things I remembered about Linda Tripp, when she told me this, and I remembered it from one of our conversations when we worked at the White House back in the 90s together, was she was a voracious reader. She read everything, fiction, nonfiction, history. She's from Virginia. There's a lot of history there. And she read my book. And I remember her joking with me that her husband, one of his criticisms of Linda was he couldn't walk into their bedroom and walk across the room without stepping around piles of books. And on the top of one of those piles was Christ's character. And she got very emotional talking about the book. And she was incredibly kind. And she pointed out some things about me writing the book where, you know, inadvertently we were sending the same message. Our book helped back up her and strengthen her position inadvertently, and vice versa. And I was always grateful for her words. And that's who she really was. And I hope her family and her have nothing but peace. And that's pretty much, I think, the end of it. She was a good person. She did the right thing. She was a true American, and that flag flies a little bit better because of her, in my opinion.
Okay, I'm really glad we did this episode, and yeah, I mean, we'll keep posting about her. We'll keep,
Sure.
I mean, her
If anybody
legacy
has
is
any
out there
questions.
in all the articles and through
Sure.
the book. And if anyone has any questions or wants to reach out, they can do so
Right.
through Gary's social media, Facebook, Twitter,
Official
Facebook.
Gary
We
J.
monitor
Byrne.
all the time. And officialgaryjbyrne.com. You can listen to this podcast through the podcast, and we're also posting it to YouTube. I want to thank everyone so much for watching. Like and subscribe, and reach out if you have any questions, comments, or things you want Gary to jump into. So with that, thank you.
All right, that's in.